am getting married in 2 weeks, and I am totally screwed. I literally need to get this off my chest. I feel like I'm going insane. My fiancée Sarah and I have known each other for about 6 years, engaged for 1. Our wedding is scheduled to take place in just 2 weeks, and I just witnessed something that is making me feel like I am making the biggest mistake of my life tonight. Sarah and I were taking a rare opportunity to relax at home. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner while I was out back working on one of my projects. Anyway, as you do when you're doing heavy labor, I got thirsty and came back to the house to get a drink, where I saw Sarah at the counter, preparing dinner and talking on speakerphone. I recognized the voice instantly as my brother-in-law, Marty. Now, this is where my brain gets totally twisted. Marty asked Sarah where her sister, Evelyn, is, as he's been trying to get in contact with her, and she's not answering texts. I heard Sarah say to him she just left here. She should be home in a half hour or so. It should be noted that Evelyn is Marty's wife of 5 years. I have to admit that I didn't immediately register what she had just said because I went into the kitchen, grabbed a glass, and asked Sarah, "What was that all about?" She responded with, "Marty was looking for Evie." I see her texting, and I ask her, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm texting Evie that Marty was looking for her." Anyway, I pour myself a drink, sit down, have a sip, and then finally my brain starts to work. First off, I heard Sarah tell Marty that Evelyn was here. Evelyn was not here. The last time we saw her was yesterday when she came over to work on some last-minute wedding decoration stuff with Sarah. Secondly, why is she texting Evelyn and expecting a response when I distinctly heard Marty say that Evelyn wasn't answering her texts? Lastly, why the hell would she tell Marty that Evelyn should be back in 30 minutes unless she either knows where she is or she is right now in front of me, texting her to tell her to get her butt home quickly? The only conclusion that I came up with is that Sarah is lying to Marty about the whereabouts of her sister and is probably warning Evie that Marty will expect her home in half an hour. I then spent probably the next 5 hours concocting various explanations for this behavior, some decent, some downright horrible, and playing them back in my head. I wanted really badly to ask Sarah about this, but at the same time, if what I think is going on, then I doubted I'd get a straight answer, which brings me to about an hour ago. I woke up around 1 a.m. to use the toilet, and I couldn't resist the urge to check Sarah's phone. We both know each other's pins, so this wasn't a difficult thing to do. Anyway, I grabbed the phone, retreated to the bathroom, and unlocked it. And yep, it was exactly what I was afraid of, and probably what most of you were expecting. Sarah's sister, Evelyn, has been having an affair for about 6 months with a coworker, and Sarah has been helping Evelyn cover it up for almost that entire time. There are literally hundreds of texts between them discussing it. Discussing the coworker, discussing sex stuff, really embarrassing things about my brother-in-law, just stuff that makes my stomach churn. And here is my soon-to-be wife going along with all of it. Without batting an eye, I took some screenshots of the entire thread, put the phone back where I found it, and then retreated to my home office to find myself here, typing it all out on Reddit, simply so I can avoid the primal scream that wants to come out of my mouth right now. I am totally 100% screwed. I cannot marry Sarah. I just cannot do it. I can't think of any reasonable excuse she could offer me about assisting her sister in this affair and victimizing not only Marty, but their 2-year-old daughter as well. On the other hand, myself, my family, Sarah, and her family have all sunk an enormous amount of money into a wedding that is supposed to happen in around 2 weeks. There is no way we are getting any of that money back. On top of that, I feel like an absolute fool. Like, how did I not know this woman was like this? And what the hell am I going to do? I can't marry her. I absolutely cannot. However, I still want to. She's beautiful and fun and kind, and I thought we had a bright future ahead of us. She's never done anything wrong to me, but I just can't see her the same now. It's like a big black stain on an otherwise beautiful picture. I just don't know how the hell I got this, so I'm gonna take a shower and head into work a little early to avoid Sarah and Stu on this. Thanks to the supportive people here, and a big raspberry to the dill holes who keep saying I should figure out whatever good reason my soon-to-be ex-fiancé had for this garbage. Edit 3. I got into work around 7. No one was in the office, so I decided to start pulling off the band-aid, and I called my brother. He lives in Australia, so he was still up after having just put his kids to bed. It was hard breaking the news to him about this because I know he has laid out a huge amount of money for flights for him and his family to come. But to his credit, as an older brother, he didn't mention it one time and just backed me up. He made a great point too. He said, "You work in a job where you have to deal with liars and scammers day in and day out. I don't blame you for wanting to have somewhere to go where this isn't a concern." He was totally right about that. And I get now why I'm reacting so strongly to Sarah's participation in this deceit. He also had a great idea. He was going to take his family down to Florida to do some sightseeing and visit the parks. Well, now the kids will be accompanied by their uncle as well. It should be easy since we were going to honeymoon there as well, and we were planning on meeting them for a bit. Anyway, he'll just rebook everything to be closer to him and his family, and he'll offer Sarah's ticket to either my sister or another family member. I haven't had time to read everyone's comments, but I have answered a few right now. I'm just sort of making myself sick by drinking cup after cup of coffee and trying to distract myself until the day gets on enough where I can reach out to Marty. Edit 4. Just did morning stand-up. My stomach is doing flip-flops from drinking about 2 pots of coffee since I got in here so early, and I absolutely cannot focus and concentrate. I feel like I can't do anything really from my side until I tell Marty what I know. So I'm just going to take a sick day, drive over to his house, and see if he's around. If not, I'll call him and track him down. Marty is a teacher who is on break right now, and Evelyn works a 9 to 5 like me, so odds are good this works out. Wish me luck. Reddit. Edit 5. Got to Marty's house a little after 10 a.m. He had just put his daughter down for a nap, and we had a long, frankly brutal talk in the kitchen. Basically, he suspected this for a couple of months now. But Evelyn has been very good at covering her tracks, obviously, with the assistance of Sarah and a couple of their mutual friends. I unfortunately do not have all 6 months of text messages, just a couple of dozen screenshots I sent to myself from Sarah's phone, but I gave him what I have and offered to help him however I could. I am a field analyst in the CU department of a mid-sized insurer specializing in workers' compensation fraud, so I know a few things and a few people. Anyway, I am now working from my laptop in my almost brother-in-law's kitchen, trying to salvage whatever I can. I'm going to have to talk to Sarah this evening and get the word out as fast as I can to my friends and family. Now that I know I won't screw Marty over, so far I managed to rebook most of the honeymoon, although I had a problem with the ticket because Sarah was flying under her maiden name, and our carrier has a surname rule for name changes. Anyway, they did allow me to cancel, get a partial refund, and rebook for my sister, who will be accompanying her 2 brothers and nieces to Florida. In a couple of weeks, I'm holding off on canceling the venues until after I talk to Sarah, because I don't want to tip anyone off until Marty gets his chance to confront Evelyn. But I will absolutely be letting my family and friends know this afternoon sometime, and beg them to keep it close. I'm basically in a frenzy right now, canceling stuff I can cancel, and I'm heading down to the bank in a few to open a new account and get my bills sorted out. Some people have mentioned them, but it should be pretty good. The mortgage isn't in my name since we were not married, and I have the bigger income, but Sarah did contribute about $20,000 versus my $60,000 towards the down payment. I will have to probably pay her out that money and some portion of the mortgage payments for the last 16 months. But it could be worse. An update was provided as an edit in the same post. It's about 8:30 p.m. right now, and I'm writing this from my buddy's house. His name is Mark, and he's a former coworker of mine, who all we had to go on was a name. Let's call him Jake. The first thing I did was not some major amount of sleuthing. It was basically just going through LinkedIn, trying to find the guy through Evelyn's connections, but that brought up nothing, which I thought was strange. Marty had told me that Evelyn was supposed to go out for drinks tonight after work, and that she said she wouldn't be home until around 9 or 10. He didn't have to tell me what he suspected, since I pretty much understood right away. I told him that I would help him, but he needed to come with me. I then contacted my buddy Mark, explained the situation to him, and had him agree to meet us later in the day. The first thing we did was drive over to Marty's parents' house so that they could watch their granddaughter. I don't know what Marty told them as I waited in the car. After that, we went to Evelyn's place of work. It's one of those large commercial strip mall type centers with all of these nondescript offices in a row in a large non-gated car park. We drove around until we found Evelyn's car, and then I had Marty unlock it with the second set of keys. I then gave Marty a voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker to place in the car. Once done with that, we left, parked a bit down the street, and waited for my friend to arrive and for Evelyn to leave. Mark shows up about 20 minutes later, hops in the car, and around an hour after that, Evelyn comes out of her office with 2 of her girlfriends, and a tall, younger-looking man with sandy blonde hair. They are obviously holding hands, and I'm like, damn, Evelyn, you're making it easy for me. I take a couple of pictures from the car and then wait for Evelyn to leave in hers, and I start tracking her. At first, I thought she might go right to a hotel or something, but she didn't. Instead, she drove to a reasonably nice bar and grill in a nice section of town and parked on the street. I drove by her as she was getting out of her car and entering the establishment, and then found my own parking spot and went over to the plant. First, we sent Mark in. Since no one knew him, he had basically two jobs. First, try to get any comp pictures he could have of Evelyn and Jake, and second, to be my alibi. Marty and I waited in the car for around 20 minutes until I got the first in the series of text messages from Mark. They were pictures of Evelyn and Jake making out in front of their two female co-workers. Marty's suspicions were right. They were helping Evelyn hide the affair from him. He was obviously very upset and angry. Evidently, one of the co-workers is married, and as a couple, they are good friends with Marty and Evelyn, both of them having toddlers around the same age. I asked Marty if that's enough for him, but he says he still really wants to know who this guy is. I try to tell him that we can find out later, but he's practically begging me at this point. So I tell him to wait, text Mark that I'm coming in, and then enter the bar myself. The first thing I see is Evelyn and her crew, laughing and drinking at one of those tall round tables near the front window. As I enter, I stop for a moment, pretend to be surprised, and then call out to Evelyn, "Hi, what are you doing here?" She's obviously shocked to see me, and everyone around her tenses up immediately. Evelyn quickly introduces me as her sister's fiancé, and says that we are getting married in 2 weeks. There are a lot of congratulations from everyone. I thank them and then stick out my hand to the blonde guy and introduce myself with my full name, hoping that he'll respond in kind. He does, and I'm a bit taken aback. He's not named Jake. I introduce myself to everyone else, and then tell Evelyn that I'm here to meet a coworker. I wave to Mark, and then excuse myself. Once I get over to Mark, I tell him the guy's name, and we both whip out our phones and go to work. It doesn't take long for us to find him. He's got social media profiles and a couple of court case judgments against him. Everything sort of falls into place when we find out that Jake is his middle name. At this point, I'm basically just grateful that Evelyn isn't cheating on Marty with two different co-workers. It turns out that Jake is 26, married, and has a 1-year-old daughter. This just keeps getting better. Anyway, I text Marty the guy's name and decide I want to push my luck and tell him to wait a few more minutes. Basically, I'm playing babysitter here at the bar. I'm totally visible to Evelyn and her crew, and wish her and her co-workers a good night. Mark and I wait for them to leave, then pay our bill and hurry back to the waiting Marty. There's a bit of hesitation here because we don't know exactly what Evelyn was going to do. Like, I have assumed she might have already booked a hotel room and was heading there, which would have made everything a lot more complicated and limited what I could do. But it turns out that tonight was probably meant to be just drinks at the bar. And it wasn't until Marty decided to spend the night at his parents' that it turned into something more. Evelyn made a beeline for home, and we followed behind her way out of sight and parked down the street. It didn't take long after that until another car pulled into Marty's driveway, and we saw Jake get out, go up to the door, knock, and be greeted by Evelyn. They went inside together. Now at this point, it's about 7:30, and I have my own stuff to do tonight. I think that as a friend, I've done pretty much all I can do for Marty, and he can handle the rest himself. I mean, I feel bad for the guy, definitely, but I don't want to get any more involved in this drama than I already am. Being the wingman for him while he confronts his cheating wife is a bit much for me, considering my situation. Marty says it's fine that he'll do the rest of it himself. Guess he's more of a man than you thought. He goes to Evelyn's car, retrieves my gear, and we bid each other goodbye. That was almost 2 hours ago. I did get one text message from Marty saying it was done and he was going to his parents' house for real this time. But my phone hasn't been blowing up, so I don't know what's been going on with Evelyn, and I've been at Mark's since then. I think that basically concludes my part in Marty's story. If he was smart and listened to my advice, he was recording with his phone when he entered the house. He'll find out later. Anyway, my biggest priority now is to head home and tell Sarah that the wedding is off. She's almost 100% going to take it badly. There's no way she won't. But like I said, I just can't get married to her right now. I don't know what the future holds for us, or if we will be done with each other or not, but definitely we are not getting married anytime soon. Also, for people who keep saying, "Why didn't you talk to her first? Why didn't you confront her?" I have to say, are you people stupid? She stone cold lied in front of me to her brother-in-law that she has known for about 10 years and purportedly thinks is a really great husband and father. Babe, maybe you are naive enough to think that someone can lie that coldly to someone they are supposed to care about and then tell you the truth. But I'm not wired that way. Until that moment, I never had cause to ever second-guess Sarah or not trust her. But she was literally untrustworthy in front of my face. And I'm supposed to let it slide or expect her to be honest with me? I guess you don't know what it's like to have your entire view of someone shift in an instant. It's disorienting and, frankly, a bit panic-inducing. I'm actually impressed I kept my head and followed my instincts instead of pressing her right away, because it led me to the truth. It would have been ridiculously easy for her to lie to me and then delete those text messages. And if she had done that, then I would never have read the horrible things she said, never seen how she can be so duplicitous and two-faced, and never realized how little I actually knew about her. I'm going home to talk to Sarah. He'll update later to let everyone know what the final verdict is. Don't expect it to be a good one. Here is another update for you guys. I guess there is a lot to go over, and so much has happened. Most of it, if I'm honest, hasn't been that great. Well, it's actually been downright shitty, but we'll get to that. First off, I left Mark's house pretty late that night. Sarah already knew I was out discussing business with him, although she had no idea that the business was actually her sister's affair. But still, it was getting to an unreasonable hour, mostly because I was trying to get up the nerve to go home and face her after about 2 or 3 pep talks from Mark. I finally got off my keister and texted Sarah I was coming home and left in my car. As I said in the last update, I was pretty surprised when I got there because when I walked into the house, Evelyn was crying on the couch with Sarah. I hadn't seen Evelyn's car in the driveway when I came home, so this was probably the last thing I was expecting. I froze for. The moment passed, and Evelyn went back to cry, Sarah back to comforting, and I let it awkwardly hang in the air for half a minute. I thought it seemed that Marty hadn't mentioned my assistance in the uncovering of Evelyn's affair. I decided to play dumb, not for any reason other than I wanted to see how Sarah reacted. I took a seat on a recliner, put down my laptop bag, and took my phone out of my pocket. I made it look like I was fidgeting with it, and then asked them what's going on. Evelyn just continued to cry, but Sarah looked at me and said, "Marty is divorcing Evie." Well, yes, I figured as much. I decided to push ahead with the obvious question. "What for?" I asked her. Sarah stopped patting Evelyn's back for a moment and looked at me. I could almost see her face twist and contort. Imagine the look a 5-year-old makes when you tell them to eat their broccoli or finish their lima beans. Evelyn shot Sarah a look that I didn't need to be a sister to understand. There was a pregnant pause until Sarah finally said, "She cheated on him." Now I have to admit this response freaking floored me. This was absolutely not what I was expecting. Sure, the more cynical readers here might think, well, the cat was out of the bag, so there's no point in hiding it. And yes, that's true. But it's also true that she could have just as easily feigned ignorance, or even worded it another way, like Marty accused Evie of cheating, instead of basically confirming it to my face. Maybe I'm being pedantic here, but it's part of my job to pay attention to not only what people say, but how they say it. Evelyn wasn't happy about this. She kind of crumpled into the couch a bit and did this strange combination of a sigh and sob at the same time. I wanted to press on, go for the gold, so to speak, but I must have stammered a bit. Sarah probably interpreted my shock, and while she would have been right in a sense, just not how she assumed. "Did you know?" Sarah didn't say anything. She just nodded, her hand still rubbing her sister's shoulder. I didn't hesitate and asked for the obvious follow-up. "How long?" The answer came back a lot easier than I thought it would. 6 months. I was shocked by how easily she admitted to it. Evelyn was shocked as well. She smacked her sister's hand off her, and I think even Sarah was a little shocked at saying it out loud. I leaned back in the recliner, and my face timed to tug the rest of that Band-Aid clear off. We're not getting married. There were 2 looks like stunned goats and a chorus of huh from both sisters. I stood up and repeated myself. We're not getting married. I can't marry someone who would cover up adultery, especially not for 6 months. Sarah sprang off the couch and opened her arms. The body language was, "You can't be serious." But I just put my hands in front of myself. "I'm serious. I don't like this, not one bit. I don't like that you took part in this, and I can't get married to you with how I feel. It would be a mistake." But waterworks started immediately, and even Evelyn did that thing with her mouth that looks like a perch trying to suck air. There were wails from Sarah, accusations of not loving her, appeals to my sense of duty, the loss of money, the inconvenience to all our friends, the embarrassment of it all. It was, frankly, nothing I hadn't already thought about, but it definitely felt different hearing Sarah say it through body-racking sobs. It was at this point I probably made a big mistake. Well, maybe not, because I have no idea how long Marty would have kept my involvement in everything off the books. But in an effort to convince Sarah of the finality of it all, I said, "Look, I already canceled the honeymoon. It's not happening." I knew it was a bomb the second it left my mouth, and the explosion was damn near immediate. Evelyn, to her credit, had always been pretty quick on the uptake, which is probably how she had managed to fool her husband for so long. I could almost see the realization dawning on her when she put it all together with my appearance at the bar earlier in the evening. She screamed, "You son of a..." and flew across the room at me. Now, I'm not a huge guy, but I'm no slouch either. But the force that Evelyn flung herself at me had me staggering backward, and I barely had enough time to get my hands up before she started raking my face with her fingernails. I almost lost the phone I still had in my hand, but I marched into my home office and locked the door. I dialed the police and told them I had been attacked by my fiancée sister and had locked myself in my office because I was bleeding from my face. Evelyn had scratched me pretty good along the inside of my left eye, and my vision was blurry. I feared for my life. I even told them that I had recorded the entire altercation on my phone. Just as I was finishing up my conversation, Sarah came knocking on the door. "Opie, please come out. We need to talk about this, and please, I love you. Don't do this. We don't need to do this." And even Evelyn is sorry. She wants to apologize. I'm pretty sure that last one was a lie, but Sarah was obviously losing her mind. I didn't answer her, and her attempts to cajole me out of the office ended probably right when the police showed up at our front door. I could hear Sarah talking to them, and I decided to come out. The cops were two males. One of them looked younger than me, maybe around Sarah's age, and the other one looked older and more annoyed about life in general. I introduced myself, pointed at Evelyn, stating that she attacked me, and offered to show the cops the recording I made. The younger one asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. He asked me again if I wanted to press charges. I said yes again. At this point, both cops looked at each other, and before the young cop could open his mouth again, I said, "Yes, damn it. I want to press charges. I have video evidence, and this is going to court, or else I'm going to call up your boss and ask him to come down and do it himself." I think they were pretty surprised that I knew his name, not that we are friends or anything, but given my line of work, I spend plenty of time interfacing with local law enforcement, and I have met most of the brass or talked to them on the phone a couple of times in the last few years. Honestly, at this point I was getting pretty hot under the collar, and while I get what these guys were thinking, I don't agree with it at all. Facts are facts. Sure, I might not be bleeding out on the floor, but Evelyn assaulted me in my own home, and I wanted her gone. Thankfully, this situation didn't immediately escalate, and the two officers handcuffed Evelyn and put her in the back of the patrol car. She was squealing and crying like some sort of gibbering maniac the entire time. Sarah wasn't much better. She just kept going. "No, please, no," over and over again. At this point, the younger cop circled back and asked us if everything was okay. I just told him I was going to bed. He asked Sarah again, and she didn't immediately answer. So he said, "Is everything okay here, ma'am?" It was clear what he was fishing for at this point. I really disliked this guy, but I bit my lip. Sarah finally realized that the cop was addressing her, and she just nodded at him. Obviously, the guy was not satisfied with this and started to ask her again, at which point I interjected and said, "If you want to go on a fishing expedition, you might want to do it over there on the lawn where my doorbell camera isn't recording you." I think at this point I had pushed my luck with this guy one too many times, but what could I do? I think I was probably about 30 seconds from getting the cuffs slapped on me until his partner came up and basically pulled him away. He was an older man, probably in his late 50s, and probably didn't want to process two arrests right at the beginning of his shift, especially when one of them was obviously going to be more trouble than it was worth. I'm pretty sure he talked him out of it, and they left carrying Evelyn away, hopefully out of my life forever. At this point, I'm thinking about whether I want to stay here or not. The fact that my parents live a couple of hours away, combined with the thought of how poor I am going to be in the short term here, ruled out either their place or a hotel. So I just decided to sleep in the guest room. Sarah made some futile efforts to get me to engage with her in conversation or to sleep in our bed, but I just told her we'd talk tomorrow and that I was tired and didn't want to be disturbed. Thankfully, she let me be, and I crashed harder than I had in years, which pretty much brings us up to speed to the last update. But dear friends of Reddit, let me tell you this, the next day was by far the weirdest day of my life. To start with, I woke up at 11 a.m. Sarah was still home. She had cleaned the house from top to tooting. She tried to sit next to me on the couch, and I thought about rebuffing her, but I didn't. We were not getting married, but I didn't need to act like I hated her, because truthfully, I didn't. I was disappointed in her, decently disgusted by some of the things I had read in her text exchanges between her sister, but we were both hurting here, and I didn't want to make it any worse or escalate things to a point where life could get any more complicated than it already was. It took some more convincing on my part for Sarah to truly and fully believe the wedding was off. She was not taking it well. Hell, that's an understatement. She was a wreck. I think she was hyperventilating a few times. I was holding it together better, but obviously not only was this my idea, I had also had longer to come to terms with it. Finally, she asked the serious question, what about us? I know I'm going to get a lot of hate from people for this, especially the kind of Redditors that think every infraction in a relationship is grounds for nuking it from orbit. And indeed, one could even say that my calling off the wedding was like dropping a Moab on our 6-year partnership. But truthfully, I didn't have an answer for Sarah in that moment. I just didn't know. And I told her. So I said I read all those text messages, and it showed me a side of her that I didn't know existed, and that I wasn't certain about her or our relationship anymore. I said I couldn't understand why she would go along with Evelyn putting down Marty and joining in on it, even egging her on and cheating on not only him but their daughter too. She just kept saying, I know it was wrong. I asked her for an explanation, but she couldn't provide one. She just said that she got carried away and that she had to choose her sister. I told her that I thought a good sister was someone who kept you on the straight and narrow and didn't give you a free pass to be a douchebag. She agreed with me and said that she would do better, but that Evelyn had always been the boss when they were kids, and she was always the follower. I get this. I have an older sibling too, and while I'm a bit more independent, I also spent the last 18 years of my life with him, living on the other side of the planet, except for the odd occasional visit around Thanksgiving or Christmas. But still, maybe I had a leg up on Sarah because my older sibling was a decent guy, while Evelyn was a piece of trash. Now here's where I get the second major effing shock of my life in like 48 hours. Sarah says to me, it's not fair. It's not fair. What's not fair? I asked her. You were sexting that bimbo wife Mandy girl on Instagram last year, and I got over it. I was so hurt, but I got over it. Why can't you get over this? Why? Huh? What the hell is she talking about? Who is this bimbo wife Mandy? Like I have no effing clue. I asked her if she was high or having a psychotic break. Like, okay, that was mean of me. But I have absolutely not been doing cybersex or sexting or whatever with anyone, especially not some Instagram girl. I'm protesting pretty loudly at this point, and Sarah is yelling at me through her tears, telling me that she saw the messages last year and that she decided to not confront me because I had stopped. Evidently, she had been checking my socials from my home computer when I am at work, which should have been really boring because I have only family and a couple of work friends on there. I try to make this case to her, offering to let her log into all my accounts and check for herself, but she's just calling me a liar and a pervert and all sorts of shit. She starts throwing stuff at me, and so things are getting out of hand, and I tell her that if she throws one more thing, he'll have her taken out of this house, just like her sister. She swears at me and stomps off to the master bedroom and slams the door. Now at this point, I am so damn confused. I barely know what to think. I head into my office, fire up my desktop and type bimbo wife Mandy into Google. Sure enough, there is an Instagram, a Twitter, a Reddit even, and of course, an OnlyFans. I click on one of the Instagram links, and up comes a post of a numb, extremely busty woman, like clearly pushing the limits of science and technology. And no guess where she's from? Australia. While everyone, remember all the nice stuff I was saying about my brother? Guess who was staying with us last Christmas? What is this world coming to? For a brief moment, I try to connect the dots between whatever the hell Sarah saw my brother do and what she did with Evelyn. But, try as I might, it doesn't really come together. Maybe she's a more tolerant or forgiving person than I am. which is why she didn't confront me when she saw this. But I wish she had. It would have given me an opportunity to directly tell her my whole personal stance on these things, and to even show her how I would act. It might have influenced her in a good way later on, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered. I don't know. All I know is that this post is becoming a novel, and I have blown off most of the morning when I should be working to get this out of my head and onto this page. I feel better for doing it. But there is still probably another 2 to 3 posts left to tell. I'm not going to post them to this subreddit anymore. I'm not sure that they'd let me, but I will try to quietly update my profile in the next day or two with the rest of the blowout, talking to my brother, talking to my parents, and Sarah's parents. And finally, where Sarah and I stand. One thing that I can say, however, is it seems like most of my immediate family relationships are incredibly strained for various reasons. My parents are largely supportive, but that's becoming less so now that the reality of the financial loss is setting in. Yes, the marriage is still off. That was pretty much a certainty from the get-go. Sarah's parents are a bit more pissed, and I'm sure they are sticking pins in voodoo dolls crafted in my image right now. Evelyn, for people who are wondering, is no longer in jail. She got Sarah to bail her out. And I even laid into Sarah for that, calling her sister's underling, which I think actually struck a chord with her, because she wrote me like a 20-page letter about how her sister always bossed her around throughout her entire childhood. I've read it twice now, and I wish we had talked about this pretty much any time within the last 6 years. Maybe things would be different. I don't know. Anyway, read it if anyone is still interested. Expect the final chapter of this saga in like a day or two, and maybe a follow-up after the former wedding date passes. Note by Boefindy makes an appearance in the comments. 08-10-23 update. August 10, 2023. This update has taken longer to get around to than I originally intended. A lot of things have happened over the last couple of days that have kept me pretty busy. And it really wasn't until today, when I had some free time after lunch, that I could sit down and get this out. I'll try to get through as much as I can before that. However, I just want to mention a couple of things in response to comments from the last post. I'll try to be brief. Firstly, I don't know much of what's going on with Marty and his divorce, other than, to my knowledge, he's still divorcing her. Obviously, no papers or anything, but the intention is clear. In addition to that, I'm not really in the position to be advocating for any sort of course of action that Marty should take, or offering him legal advice, or assisting him in doing anything to the other man, or tracking down the other man's wife, etc. Marty is a grown man, and he can do whatever he wants with the situation. My position as his friend is just to support him and offer advice if he asks for it. Secondly, this isn't some sort of guerrilla marketing for an OnlyFans girl. If it was, I should have done it on the first post, which hit the front page of Reddit and was seen by over 3 million people. Also, given that this post got so popular on Reddit, it's not really a surprise that bimbo wife Mandy, another Redditor, happened to be following the story and saw her name. It could have easily been any other of the hundreds and hundreds of girls who use Reddit to post their pictures. And as a brief aside, speaking of Mandy, I have indeed talked to her. She was actually quite helpful in confirming something for me, and as a person, she seems quite nice. But guys, there are no romance plans here in the future. Mandy is married, evidently quite happily, for almost 2 decades, and frankly, while her husband must be cool with it, she's way too much for a mere insurance guy like me to handle seriously. So, with that all out of the way, on to the update. Last time I wrote it, I ended it up with me assuming that my brother had used my office computer to chat with Mandy, but it was too late for me to contact him. I am one of those guys that, once a problem is put in front of him, must be actively working on trying to solve it. So, I needed to do the rest myself, out of respect for my friends. I decided to call instead of text. But this might have been a bad idea since every phone call typically resulted in a rather lengthy explanation of why I was canceling the wedding. I know I could have given some other excuse, but I wanted people to know that I wasn't being frivolous or just experiencing something inane like cold feet. It was important, not just for my own reputation, but I think in order to show respect to the people who had agreed to come on that day to support me and Sarah as a couple. Because of this, it wasn't until late into the evening when I finally managed to contact everyone, which meant it was now morning time in Australia. I knew what I needed to do, but I wanted to make sure that my ducks were all in a row. So I took a breather and made a sandwich in the kitchen. I noticed that Sarah wasn't home. I had no idea when she left, and I sat down to eat and think about what to do with my brother's situation. Let's call my brother Carl for the sake of shortness here. Now, Carl and I have always been pretty close, despite him being 13 years older than me. He was this sort of quasi-parental figure in my life, because by the time I became capable of having long-term memories, he was already well on his way to becoming an adult. He was always generous with his time, played with his little brother when other teenagers would probably have avoided such an activity like the plague, and generally seemed very mature and wise to me growing up. Suffice it to say, I respected him greatly. The idea that he had been sexting with a girl who wasn't his wife in my house was something that I was still coming to grips with. I needed to decide what to do. Talking to him about it was obvious. But at this point, given how much of a shambles my relationship with Sarah was, I didn't know if I cared about having him confess just for the sake of clearing my name. Was there anything to salvage? Anyway, I needed to, for my own sake of propriety at least, yell at him about this and convince him to stop. However, I wasn't sure if I was going to rat him out or not to my sill. It all depended on what he told me and if I believed him or not. I finished my meal and logged into Facebook and video called Carl. Now, Carl works mostly from home as a remote office worker since his field is related to IT, and he's almost always available during the day. Today was no exception. It didn't even ring more than once or twice before he answered. We greeted each other, exchanged some pleasantries, and then I just sort of dove into it and asked him if he had been using my computer to sex chat women on the internet when he was visiting me. Carl's face froze, and he leaned over out of frame of the camera. He was obviously closing his office door. "Yeah, I did. Why?" he said to me. I swore under my breath and explained to Carl how Sarah had thought that his flirting was me, since he used my computer. I explained that I wasn't happy to take the hit for him, and I asked him point blank if Karen knew about this or not. He waffled for a few seconds, stumbling over his words, and then looked a bit sheepish and said that no, Karen didn't know, and he'd prefer if it was kept that way. He went on to explain that their relationship had been pretty rough since their youngest was born 4 years ago, mainly in the bedroom department. Carl had always been a pretty private person, especially when it came to intimate details, or at least he had always been that way when talking to his much younger baby brother. However, this time he just let it all lay out. Things had been bad. He had been tired of getting rejected. Karen was always tired no matter what he did or how much he helped out around the house. Eventually, this led to problems on his side, some sort of performance anxiety on the few occasions where Karen would actually feel up for some bedroom fun, and things just got worse from there. Basically, he said there's no amount of socks picked up, laundry folded, dishes washed, or time spent minding children that would get him laid. It was just not happening. So, he started to spend time in his office at night working. He even did the finger quotes when saying this. Evidently, his working at night turned into a pretty hardcore addiction to OnlyFans sites, which, given the relative privacy he had in his office for legitimate work, spiraled out of control pretty quickly. I asked him if he was still doing it, and he swore up and down that he wasn't. I thought I believed him when he said it. He seemed to be sincere. But I just had this niggling feeling in the back of my skull. I personally thought it would be best if Karen knew. But at the same time, I didn't know if I felt comfortable potentially dropping a nuke on my brother's marriage over something. He not only said he stopped, but is in this sort of moral gray area. For me, I didn't have an answer right away as to what to do, but I did urge him to tell his wife about this and to get into marriage counseling. He said that they actually had been going for the last 6 months. And while it was helpful, what had really helped him was getting a prescription for some generic Viagra. I actually did a spit take at that, neatly spraying my computer screen with water. He told me that they had been trying to make sure they have intimate time, at least a couple of times a week, and the Viagra had cured him of his performance anxiety to the point where now they were both looking forward to spending time together after the kids went to bed. The general gist of this was something along the lines of, "Hey, this is actually going in the right direction. Now please don't screw this up for us." I really didn't want to be in this position, not just for the sake of Carl and Karen, but for my 2 nieces as well. And if what Carl was telling me was the truth, I could be tossing a firebomb into a relationship that was starting to mend. It was unpredictable. What would happen? So yeah, it may disappoint some people, but at the time, I felt that the best option I had was to wait and see. I was, after all, going to meet him in a couple of weeks in the flesh. And once I got him alone in a room and a few drinks into him, I was going to definitely get to the bottom of this. It seemed like the best course of action. Anyway, that night, I went to bed early. I didn't see Sarah until the next morning. She looked haggard, like she had a distinct lack of sleep. I asked her where she had been, mostly out of habit. After all, we had been together for almost 6 years. She told me that she had gone down to the courthouse for Evelyn's arraignment to post bail, and that afterwards, she had driven her to her parents' house and spent the night. She made a point of telling me how horrible it was to have to explain to her parents that I had called off the wedding. I asked her if her parents knew the reason why, and she barked. Of course they do. I tried to remain calm, but by this point in this ordeal, I was losing. I bit back at her. Are you going to move back there so that they have both girls at home? Now it was childish and petty, but the fact that she bailed Evelyn out of jail annoyed me to no end. You don't need to be an ass about this, she said, to which I replied. And you don't need to be Evelyn's fucking underling. I could see Sarah visibly flinch when I said that to her. It obviously had struck a chord. The corners of her eyes started to tear up, and I cooled my temper. We just sort of stood there, miles apart in the living room of our house, and didn't say anything for a good solid minute or two, until Sarah decided to continue talking. Our parents are going to be here at 3. I actually face-palmed at this. I was about to go off on her for not consulting me on this, but decided that was just my own ego. After all, I did need to sit down with them and work out the details around the wedding and whatever remaining deposit we had, and I needed to at least once face-to-face explain to everyone why it wasn't happening. So fine, let's do this and get it out of the way. I tried to make myself busy, but there isn't much you can do on a Sunday except waste time, and time wasting isn't very enjoyable when you know you are heading into the meat grinder in just a few hours. Still, 3 p.m. came, and so did our parents. We all sat down at the large kitchen table that Sarah had bought just a month after we closed on the house. It was secondhand from Facebook Marketplace, but she loved it because it was solid oak with a beautiful finish and capable of seating 8. She always wanted to have big dinner parties with our families over, just not like this. The next 3 hours were grueling. No one was happy, nor should they be, I guess. The best support I could get came unsurprisingly from my own parents, but even that was tempered, essentially along the lines of, well, it's his decision to make, which more or less means, yeah, we think this is crazy too, but we're still backing him. Honestly, that was fine with me. I didn't need my parents to get the stigma by association of canceling the wedding. The fact that I even brought up settling the house equity seemed to shock her, because the implication here is that I expect her to move out of our home. She threw a fit, and I don't blame her. I should have settled our relationship status with her first, before trying to negotiate a payment plan with her parents. It really tipped my hand to everyone about how I was feeling about our relationship. And while I think our parents expected it, or at least understood, Sarah was beside herself. She was absolutely not accepting of us breaking up over this. And she made it clear, I am not moving out of my house, and we are not breaking up, she declared. And that's pretty much how my Sunday night ended. After our parents left, Sarah and I tried to talk it out some more, but we kept running in circles around each other. I had to curb my natural inclination to run her down until we got a resolution. Truthfully, I was pretty damn tired as well, and I just wanted to turn off my brain, believe it or not. We just ended up sitting on the couch and watching a movie together in silence until it was time to go to sleep. We left it there with a "we'll talk about it more tomorrow," and retreated to our separate rooms. On Monday, I woke up to a large handwritten letter slid under the door from Sarah. I took a brief look at the first few pages and decided I would deal with it later and went to work. When I left, Sarah was still in bed. She must have been up late writing that letter. At the office, I scheduled some meetings and started calling venues and vendors that were on my list. It was a mixed bag of results. The catering people were adamant that I pay most of their fees under the pretense that they had ordered most of the food. I shot back at them over this. Like, were they expecting me to eat a week-old steak? But my appeal fell on deaf ears. I tried talking to the woman who ran the catering business and explaining what happened, but that seemed to only firm up her resolve to get as much money as possible out of me. Inversely, the DJ that I had hired for the entertainment was incredibly kind and gave us back almost all the money. Things went on like this, and during the day, between making calls and doing work, I read Sarah's letter. Now this is 20 pages of written word, so I'm just going to summarize the gist of it. The gist was that ever since childhood, Sarah has been bullied by Evelyn. In response, Sarah's way of dealing with this was to essentially go along with whatever Evelyn wanted or wanted to hear. She went on to say that it had become sort of a general way of operating in her life, that she was just afraid to rock the boat, to cause a problem, or sometimes even to voice an opinion. I reflected on this because, truthfully, when I look back at our relationship with a more critical eye, I kind of think that Sarah was a bit too perfect of a girlfriend. What I mean by that is she never disagreed with me, never picked her plans over mine, or even really advocated too strongly against anything I wanted it to do. She went out of her way to make herself appear useful and all around acted more or less like a yes woman in our relationship. I mean, we had never even so much as had a minor disagreement in 6 years, let alone a full-blown argument. Until now, it sounds great from a relationship standpoint. Until, of course, it's not. I couldn't shake this feeling that Sarah has this deep-seated insecurity and need to make people happy. You know what they call people-pleasing behavior? When I start looking at it this way, a lot of things make sense to me. I start to realize that despite being with Sarah for 6 years, I don't actually know her that well. It's like she's put up this image around her, which is really just a mirror, a reflection of whatever she thinks people want to see. And in the case of our relationship, she's more or less been acting in my role as the perfect girlfriend, while never really letting me inside to see who she is as a person. Hell, I can't even say that what I saw in those text messages is the real Sarah, because it's almost certainly just another reflection, this time of Evelyn and all her warts and faults. This may sound weird, but it's like we are in this unequal relationship, whereas maybe she loves me for who I am and how I wear my thoughts on my face and my heart on my sleeve, but maybe I only love her for the mirror she is holding up to my face. I don't know if this sounds too metaphysical for you, then I'm right there as well. It's like this wisp of an idea that I'm still trying to catch by my fingertips. All I know is that in the last few days, I've probably learned more about Sarah than I had to more. And I can say that I feel much more confident and assured that my decision to call off the wedding was the correct one. In fact, it could not be any more correct. That night, after our talk, I went to bed with much less angst than I had in a few days. The story probably ends here, since I couldn't find more. So, if you watched this long-ass video, comment Pepe. Thank you for watching. For more real stories and powerful dramas, be sure to like, subscribe, and explore the My Twisted Confessions channel.